The night I realized my own son might be betraying me began like every other quiet evening in my Seattle home. Ryan stood in the doorway with a glass of water and 2 small white pills. "Your vitamins, Mom," he said gently. "They'll help your memory." For months I had trusted him. I swallowed them every night without question. But lately something felt wrong. I had been forgetting things, falling asleep in the middle of the day, losing pieces of conversations I knew I had just had. That night I did something different. I pretended to swallow the pills and hid them under my tongue. A few minutes later, when Ryan thought I was asleep, I heard him whisper something in the living room that made my blood run cold. "Give it a few more weeks," he said. "She's already getting confused." And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The person I trusted most in this world might be slowly destroying my mind. If you've ever trusted someone with your life, only to question that trust later, I hope you'll stay with me for this story. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it there right now. And if stories about family truth and hidden betrayal speak to you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of what happened. Because what I discovered after that night was far worse than I ever imagined. When people hear what happened to me, the first question they usually ask is the same one, asterisk. How could you not see it sooner, asterisk? The truth is, when someone is your child, you don't look at them through the same lens you use for the rest of the world. You don't question their kindness. You don't search their words for hidden meaning. And you certainly don't imagine that the boy you once carried in your arms might someday see you as an obstacle. My name is Nicole Lewis. I'm 66 years old, and until recently, I believed I had been incredibly lucky in life. My husband Thomas Lewis and I had spent 40 years together. We met when we were both in our 20s in Tacoma, Washington. He worked as a mechanical engineer, and I worked as an accountant for a shipping company. We weren't wealthy, but we built a stable life, one that revolved around hard work, quiet weekends, and raising our only child, Ryan. Ryan Lewis was born on a rainy April morning, and from the moment I held him, I believed my purpose in life had become very simple. Protect him, support him, and make sure he had opportunities I never had. Thomas felt the same. Ryan grew up to be the kind of boy teachers praised. He was polite, responsible, ambitious. He played baseball in high school, graduated from the University of Washington, and eventually became a real estate broker in Seattle. By his early 30s, he had already sold more homes than many agents twice his age. Thomas used to say proudly, "That boy knows how to talk to people." And Ryan did. He had a natural charm that made people trust him quickly. For most of my life, I believed that same charm came from a genuinely good heart. When Thomas died 3 years ago, the house felt unbearably quiet. Cancer had taken him faster than we expected. One year, he was fixing the fence in the backyard, and the next year, I was sitting beside a hospital bed listening to machines beep in slow, steady rhythms. After the funeral, Ryan came to visit more often. At first, it was small things. He would stop by on Sundays, help me mow the lawn, fix a leaking faucet, bring groceries. I remember one afternoon when we were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee while rain tapped gently against the windows. Ryan looked around the house thoughtfully. "You shouldn't be here alone, Mom," he said. I laughed softly. "I've lived here for 38 years. I think I can handle it." But Ryan shook his head. "That's not what I mean. It's just, if something happened, what if you fell? What if you needed help?" His concern seemed genuine. I remember feeling grateful that my son cared so much. A few weeks later, Ryan brought his wife Amanda over for dinner. Amanda Lewis was younger than Ryan by about 3 years. She worked in marketing for a tech company downtown and had always seemed polite, though a little distant. She was the type of person who dressed impeccably even when visiting family. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect smile. That night, over roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, Ryan cleared his throat. Amanda and I were thinking about something he said carefully. I looked up from my plate. "What kind of something?" Amanda smiled in that measured way of hers. "We were wondering if it might make sense for us to move in here for a while." I blinked. "Move in?" Ryan nodded quickly. "Just temporarily. The market's crazy right now, and we're thinking about upgrading to a bigger place eventually. But in the meantime, it would also mean we could help take care of you." I remember feeling a little embarrassed. "I don't need taking care of," I said. Ryan reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's not about that, Mom. It's about family. We'd feel better knowing you're not alone. When you lose your spouse after 4 decades together, loneliness becomes something you feel in your bones. Even simple things like making breakfast for one person instead of 2 start to feel strange. So after a few days of thinking about it, I agreed. Ryan and Amanda moved into the upstairs bedrooms that spring. At first, it felt like the house had come back to life. There was noise again. Laughter. Footsteps in the hallway. Amanda sometimes worked from home, and Ryan came and went between property showings. In the evenings, we would occasionally sit together in the living room watching television. For a while, it felt comforting. Then slowly, small things began to change. Amanda started asking questions. At first, they seemed harmless. One evening, while we were washing dishes together, she said casually, "Nicole, have you ever thought about downsizing?" I shrugged. "I like this house. It's very large for one person," she said. "2 people now," I replied lightly. She smiled but didn't respond. Another time, she asked about my retirement savings. "Just planning things," she explained quickly. "Ryan says you worked as an accountant for decades." "That's right," I said. "You must have a solid nest egg." I remember laughing. "Enough to stay comfortable, hopefully." She nodded thoughtfully but didn't push further. At the time, I didn't think much about those conversations. Families talk about finances sometimes, especially when multiple generations live under the same roof. Then a few months after they moved in, Ryan began bringing me the vitamins. It started one evening after dinner. He walked into the living room holding a small orange bottle. "Mom, I picked these up for you," he said. "What are they?" "Memory support vitamins. Lots of people take them as they get older." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I'm getting forgetful?" He chuckled. "Not at all, just preventative." The pills were small and white. He placed 2 in my hand and handed me a glass of water. I swallowed them without hesitation. It became routine after that. Every night around 10 o'clock, Ryan would knock gently on my bedroom door. "Vitamin time, Mom." Sometimes Amanda would be behind him in the hallway. Sometimes not. I never questioned it. After all, why would I? But gradually, over the following months, I started noticing things about myself that felt off. I began forgetting where I placed my reading glasses. Once I left the stove on after making soup. Another time, I repeated the same story twice during dinner without realizing it until Ryan gently pointed it out. "Mom," he said kindly, "you told us that yesterday." I felt embarrassed. "Did I?" Ryan just smiled reassuringly. "It happens." Amanda began making small comments too. Nothing harsh. Just observations. "You seemed a little confused earlier," she once said. "Are you sleeping enough?" Another time she mentioned that I looked tired in the middle of the afternoon when I nodded off in my chair. Ryan would always respond the same way. "It's normal at your age." And slowly, so slowly, I barely noticed it, began to shape the way I saw myself. Maybe I was becoming forgetful. Maybe this was simply what aging looked like. Until the night I pretended to swallow the vitamins. And everything changed. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Even though I lay in bed with the lights off and my eyes closed, my mind refused to quiet down. Ryan's voice echoed again and again in my head. Asterisk. "Give it a few more weeks. She's already getting confused." Asterisk. The way he had said it wasn't worried. It wasn't concerned. It sounded satisfied. For the first time in my life, I felt something toward my own son that I had never felt before. Fear. I waited until the house was completely silent. Around midnight, I slowly sat up in bed and turned on the small lamp beside me. The room looked exactly as it always had. The same pale blue curtains. The same wooden dresser Thomas had built himself 30 years ago. Everything felt normal, except me. My hands were shaking slightly as I reached for the tissue on my nightstand. Inside it were the 2 small white pills I had pretended to swallow earlier. I opened the tissue carefully and stared at them. They looked harmless. Just 2 plain tablets, but something inside me now refused to believe Ryan's explanation. I walked quietly to the bathroom and placed the pills under the bright light above the sink. I had taken vitamins before in my life. Calcium, vitamin D, fish oil. These didn't look like any of them. They were perfectly round and slightly chalky with tiny markings I didn't recognize. I leaned closer, squinting to read the faint letters pressed into one side. I couldn't make out what they meant. A strange chill ran down my spine. Why would Ryan lie about something like this? I folded the pills back into the tissue and tucked them into the drawer of my nightstand. Then I turned off the lamp and lay back down. But sleep never came. Instead, memories from the past few months began rearranging themselves in my mind, like puzzle pieces finally snapping together. The afternoon I had fallen asleep in the middle of a phone call with my friend Linda. The morning I had walked into the kitchen and forgotten why I was there. The way Ryan sometimes watched me with a thoughtful expression after I made a small mistake. At the time I had assumed it was concern. Now I wasn't so sure. Around 2 in the morning, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. My heart started beating faster. The floorboards creaked lightly outside my bedroom door. Then I heard whispers, Ryan's voice and Amanda's. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. They were speaking quietly, but the hallway carried sound easily in this old house. Amanda spoke first. "Did she take them tonight?" Ryan replied without hesitation. "Yeah." There was a short pause. Then Amanda said something that made my stomach tighten. "Good. Because the lawyer said we need at least a few more weeks of documentation." Ryan sighed. "I know, but it's already working." Working. The word echoed in my head. Amanda lowered her voice even further. "Did she seem more confused today?" Ryan gave a small laugh. "She asked me the same question twice at lunch." Amanda sounded pleased. "That's perfect." Perfect. My fingers clenched around the blanket. For a moment I wondered if I had misunderstood what they were talking about. Maybe they meant something else. Then Ryan said something that erased all doubt. "If this keeps going the way it is, the doctor will definitely recommend guardianship." The word hit me like a physical blow. Guardianship. I had heard that term before. A guardianship was what happened when a court decided someone could no longer manage their own life, their finances, their medical decisions, their property, everything. The court would appoint someone else to control it all, usually a family member, usually a son or daughter. My throat felt dry. Amanda spoke again, and once that's approved, she said quietly, "We can finally move forward." "With the house," Ryan replied. I felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Amanda continued, "The market in this neighborhood is insane right now. If we sell it this year—" Ryan interrupted her. "I know. That's why we need to make sure the evaluation happens soon." Evaluation. Guardianship. Sell the house. The words swirled together in my mind. Suddenly, all the small conversations from the past year began making terrifying sense. Amanda asking about downsizing. Ryan worrying about me living alone. The vitamins. My confusion. The documentation. They weren't trying to help me. They were building a case that I was losing my mind. And if they convinced a court of that, Ryan could legally control everything I owned. My house, my savings, my retirement, even where I lived. My chest felt tight as I listened to them continue whispering in the hallway. "What about the doctor appointment next week?" Amanda asked. Ryan sounded confident. "I've already told him about the memory issues." "And the pills?" she asked. "They're mild enough," Ryan said, "just enough to make her tired and foggy." My entire body went cold. So it was true. They weren't vitamins. They were doing this on purpose. Ryan spoke again, his voice calm and practical. "We just need to be patient. Once the doctor puts it in writing that she's declining, everything else will fall into place." Amanda exhaled slowly. "Then we won't have to live here forever." Ryan chuckled softly. "No, just long enough." Their footsteps moved down the hallway. A moment later, their bedroom door closed. Silence returned to the house. But my world had completely changed. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, feeling as though the ground beneath my life had cracked open. My son, the boy I had raised, the child whose fevers I had stayed up all night nursing, the young man whose college tuition Thomas and I had worked extra hours to afford. He was drugging me, not to help me, not to care for me, but to make me look mentally unstable, so he could take everything I owned. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't help me now. What I needed was clarity and control. Slowly, another realization began forming in my mind. Ryan and Amanda believed their plan was working. They believed I was becoming confused. They believed I trusted them, which meant they had no idea I had overheard everything. For the first time since their conversation began, I felt a small spark of something stronger than fear. Strategy. If they thought the pills were affecting me, then maybe I could use that. Maybe I could let them believe exactly what they wanted to believe. And while they were busy building their case against me, I could start building one against them. But first I needed to know exactly what those pills were. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. For years, my mornings had followed the same quiet rhythm. Coffee, a short walk around the neighborhood, reading the news at the kitchen table while sunlight slowly filled the room. But that morning felt different. The house felt different. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the distant noise of a passing car seemed sharper, more dangerous. Because now I knew something I hadn't known before. The people sleeping upstairs were not protecting me. They were watching me. I sat at the edge of my bed for several minutes trying to slow my breathing. Panic would only make mistakes more likely, and mistakes were exactly what Ryan and Amanda were hoping for. They wanted me to appear confused, unstable, helpless. And the terrifying part was that until last night, I had started to believe it myself. I walked quietly to the bathroom and looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had silver hair and fine lines around her eyes, but her gaze was steady, clear. I didn't look like someone losing her mind. But then again, that was the cruel trick of what Ryan was doing. If someone takes a strong sedative every night, of course they will look forgetful the next day. Of course they will seem tired, foggy, distracted. Ryan had been manufacturing symptoms, and then pointing to those symptoms as proof that something was wrong with me. My hands clenched slightly around the edge of the sink. For a moment, anger surged through me so strongly that it made my chest tighten. But anger wouldn't help either. I needed to think. I walked back to my bedroom and opened the drawer of my nightstand. The tissue with the pills was still there. Carefully, I unfolded it. The 2 white tablets stared back at me. Small, ordinary, dangerous. If I confronted Ryan right now, he would deny everything. He would probably say I was confused again. He might even use that confrontation as proof that I was unstable. No, I needed evidence, and I needed information. That meant figuring out exactly what these pills were. Around 7 o'clock, I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps. The sound of a shower turning on. Ryan and Amanda waking up. I quickly folded the pills back into the tissue and slipped them into the pocket of my robe. Then I went to the kitchen and started making coffee, forcing my hands to move slowly and normally. A few minutes later, Amanda walked in. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail and she was already dressed for work. She smiled politely when she saw me. "Good morning, Nicole." "Morning," I said, keeping my voice calm. She poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "How did you sleep?" The question sounded innocent, but now it felt like an inspection. I shrugged slightly. "Fine, I think." She studied my face for a moment. "You seemed a little tired yesterday evening." I forced a small laugh. "Well, I am 66. Amanda smiled faintly, but her eyes remained watchful. Ryan entered the kitchen a moment later, adjusting the sleeves of his dress shirt. "Morning, Mom." "Morning." He opened the cabinet, grabbed a mug, and poured coffee. For a moment, the 3 of us stood there in silence. I could feel Ryan occasionally glancing at me, observing, measuring, probably wondering if the pills had done their work. Finally, he spoke. "Did you remember to take your vitamins last night?" My heart skipped, but my face remained calm. "I think so," I said slowly. Ryan nodded. "Good. They take a little time to help, but they're good for memory." Amanda added gently, "Consistency is important." Consistency. Of course it was. They needed me to keep taking them. So the symptoms would continue. I forced myself to nod absent-mindedly. "Oh, right." Ryan looked satisfied. Then he checked his watch. "I've got a property showing this morning," he said. "Amanda, are you heading out soon?" She nodded. "Meeting at 9. They finished their coffee and gathered their things. As Ryan walked past me toward the door, he gave my shoulder a light squeeze. "Don't forget your vitamins tonight, Mom." "I won't," I said quietly. When the front door finally closed and the sound of Ryan's car pulling away faded down the street, the house fell silent again. I waited another 5 minutes just to be sure. Then I grabbed my purse. Inside it, I placed the tissue containing the pills. My heart beat faster as I stepped outside. The cool Seattle air felt sharp and refreshing. For a moment, I simply stood there on the front porch, breathing deeply. I hadn't left the house alone much in recent months. Ryan had gradually taken over errands, groceries, appointments, little things that once belonged to my daily routine. At the time, I thought he was being helpful. Now I understood something else. The less independent I appeared, the easier their story would be. I walked to my car, slowly trying not to rush. The pharmacy I planned to visit was only 10 minutes away. It was a small neighborhood place I had gone to for years. The pharmacist there, a middle-aged man named Greg, had filled prescriptions for Thomas and me countless times. If anyone could help me identify the pills, it was him. The drive there felt strangely tense. Every red light seemed longer than usual. Every passing car made me briefly wonder if Ryan might somehow find out where I was going. But when I finally pulled into the pharmacy parking lot, a small sense of determination replaced my fear. I stepped inside. The familiar smell of antiseptic and clean floors greeted me. Greg stood behind the counter sorting small white prescription bags. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. "Nicole, haven't seen you in a while. How are you?" I forced a polite smile. "I'm all right, Greg. I was hoping you could help me with something." "Of course." I walked up to the counter and carefully unfolded the tissue. The 2 pills rolled gently onto the surface between us. Greg frowned slightly. "Are these yours?" "I'm not sure," I said carefully. "My son said they're vitamins." Greg picked one up and turned it under the light. The expression on his face changed almost immediately. His eyebrows pulled together. "These aren't vitamins," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "What are they?" Greg examined the imprint on the tablet more closely. Then he looked back at me with clear concern. "This is a prescription sedative," he said. "A pretty strong one." The world seemed to tilt slightly around me. "A sedative." Greg nodded slowly. "Yes, something like this is sometimes prescribed for patients with severe anxiety or advanced dementia." My throat tightened. "Would it cause memory problems?" Greg didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." He set the pill back down on the counter. "In fact, if someone without a prescription takes this regularly, it could cause confusion, extreme fatigue, and cognitive fog." Every symptom he described felt like another piece of the nightmare locking into place. I swallowed hard. "Greg," I said quietly, "could someone give this to a person without them realizing what it is?" He looked at me carefully. "Yes." Silence hung between us. Then he asked softly, "Nicole, who gave you these?" For a moment I couldn't speak, because saying the answer out loud made it feel even more real. Finally, I whispered the truth. "My son." Greg's face went completely still. Greg didn't say anything for a few seconds. The pharmacy around us remained quiet, except for the faint humming of the refrigerators behind the counter. Somewhere near the back of the store, a customer's cart rolled slowly across the floor. But all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. Greg looked down again at the pill on the counter and then back at me. "Nicole," he said, gently lowering his voice, "are you sure about that?" I nodded slowly. "He's been giving them to me every night. He said they were vitamins." Greg's jaw tightened slightly. "That's not a vitamin," he said firmly. "Not even close." He picked up the tablet again and turned it under the light. The imprint on this pill identifies it as a prescription sedative, something doctors sometimes use for patients with severe agitation, anxiety disorders, or late-stage cognitive decline. I felt a cold heaviness settle in my chest. "So if someone took this regularly—" Greg didn't let me finish the sentence. "They'd feel very tired," he said, "foggy, possibly confused." He paused before adding, "In older adults, it can affect memory and coordination pretty strongly." Exactly the symptoms Ryan had been pointing out for months. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Could it make someone seem like they're losing their mind?" I asked quietly. Greg hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Yes," he said finally. "It could." My vision blurred slightly for a moment. Everything Ryan and Amanda had been saying about my memory. Every concerned look. Every small note Amanda wrote in that little notebook she sometimes carried. They hadn't been observations. They had been evidence. Evidence they were creating. Greg leaned forward slightly. "Nicole, did a doctor prescribe this for you?" "No." "And you never agreed to take it?" "No." His expression hardened. "That's a serious problem." For a moment, I thought he might reach for the phone and call someone right there. Maybe the police. Maybe a doctor. But that idea terrified me almost as much as what Ryan had done. If Ryan discovered I had gone to the pharmacy, he would know something had changed. And if he knew that he might become more careful. Or worse, he might try something stronger. I took a slow breath. "Greg," I said quietly, "I need you to keep this conversation between us." He studied my face. "Nicole, if someone is giving you medication without your consent—" "I know," I said softly. "And I promise I'm going to deal with it." He crossed his arms slightly. "Are you safe at home?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about Ryan squeezing my shoulder that morning, about Amanda smiling politely over coffee, about the quiet way they spoke about my life like it was a business transaction. "I think so," I said. Greg didn't look convinced. "You should talk to someone," he said. "A doctor or a lawyer." A lawyer. The word lingered in my mind. I hadn't even thought that far yet. Greg slid the pills back toward me. "If you want, I can print the medication information so you know exactly what it is." "Yes," I said quickly. A minute later, he returned with a small sheet of paper. The name of the drug was printed clearly across the top. Below it were side effects: drowsiness, Memory impairment? Cognitive slowing. Every word felt like confirmation of the nightmare I had uncovered. Greg pointed to the dosage section. "This is not something people should take daily without medical supervision," he said. "Especially not someone your age." I folded the paper carefully and placed it in my purse alongside the pills. "Thank you," I said. Greg still looked troubled. "Nicole, if you need help." "I will," I assured him. Then I turned and walked toward the door. The cool morning air outside felt sharper than before, but something inside me had shifted. Earlier that morning, I had been frightened, shaken. Now I felt something else. Clarity. Ryan and Amanda believed they were slowly turning me into a confused old woman. They believed they had time. That meant they weren't expecting resistance, and that was my only advantage. As I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot, I pulled the printed medication sheet out of my purse again. The name of the drug stared back at me. Strong sedative. Cognitive impairment. I imagined Ryan standing at my bedroom door each night, smiling gently as he handed me the pills. "Your vitamins, Mom." The betrayal of that moment burned more than anything else. But anger alone wouldn't protect me. I needed a plan. If I confronted him now, he would deny everything. He might even claim I was confused again. And Amanda would back him up. Two voices against one. But what if I didn't confront them? What if I did the opposite? What if I let them believe their plan was working? I sat there for several minutes thinking. Ryan believed the pills were making me forgetful. He believed I trusted him. He believed I had no idea what he was doing. That meant he would continue acting normally, continue talking freely, continue planning, and every step he took would reveal more of the truth. A slow, careful strategy began forming in my mind. First, I would stop taking the pills. That part was easy. I would pretend to swallow them each night, just like I had done yesterday. Then I would watch, listen, pay attention to every conversation, every document, every small clue. Because if Ryan and Amanda were preparing to ask a court for guardianship, there would be paperwork, lawyers, evidence they were collecting. And if I was going to fight back, I needed proof. Proof of what they were doing. Proof that they had been drugging me. Proof that they were trying to take control of my life. The thought terrified me, but strangely it also gave me strength. For the first time in months, I felt fully awake, fully aware. When I finally started the car and drove home, I forced myself to rehearse something in my mind. A performance. If Ryan believed I was becoming confused, then I would give him exactly what he expected to see. A forgetful old woman. Someone harmless. Someone he didn't need to worry about. But behind that act, I would be watching everything. And when the time came, I would make sure the truth came out, no matter how painful it might be, because Ryan Lewis believed he was slowly taking my life away from me. What he didn't know yet was that I had just taken it back. When I returned home that morning, the house looked exactly the same as it had when I left. The quiet blue siding. The small maple tree in the front yard Thomas had planted when Ryan was 10. The same front porch where we had once sat during summer evenings watching the sunset. But stepping back inside felt different now, because I understood something I hadn't understood before. This house was no longer just my home. It had become the center of someone else's plan. I locked the door behind me and stood in the hallway for a moment listening to the silence. Ryan and Amanda were still gone. Good. That gave me time to think. I walked slowly into the kitchen and made another cup of coffee, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in my mind. Greg's words replayed over and over again. Asterisk, a strong sedative. Asterisk, memory impairment. Asterisk, confusion. Asterisk. Ryan hadn't just been manipulating my situation. He had been manufacturing it. And if he had been doing this for months, how much damage had those pills already caused? The thought made my stomach tighten. But the worst part wasn't the medication. It was the intention behind it. Ryan and Amanda weren't trying to help me. They were trying to prove something about me, that I was no longer capable of managing my own life, that I needed someone to make decisions for me, someone like Ryan. I took a slow sip of coffee and stared out the kitchen window. Across the street, Mrs. Bennett was walking her dog like she did every morning. Normal life continued. Cars drove past. Birds chirped in the trees. No one in the neighborhood had any idea that the quiet house behind me was hiding something so ugly. I looked down at the folded medication sheet Greg had printed for me. The name of the drug still made my chest feel tight. If I was going to fight this, I needed to be careful. Ryan had clearly planned things step by step, which meant he probably believed he was in control. That belief was my only advantage. Around noon, I heard the front door open. Amanda's voice drifted into the hallway. "Nicole, are you home?" I quickly folded the paper and slipped it back into my purse. In the kitchen, I called. Amanda walked in carrying her laptop bag and a takeout salad container. She placed both on the counter and gave me a polite smile. "There you are." "Where else would I be?" I said lightly. She laughed softly. "You'd be surprised." Her eyes moved over the kitchen slowly as if checking whether anything had changed. Then she opened the refrigerator. "Did you eat lunch yet?" "I'm not sure," I said casually. Amanda paused. "You're not sure?" I frowned slightly, pretending to think. Maybe I did earlier, or maybe that was breakfast. For a moment, I worried that I had overplayed it. But Amanda's expression softened with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "That's okay," she said gently. "It happens." She opened her salad and sat down at the table. "You know," she added carefully, "memory lapses can start very subtly." I nodded slowly. "Yes." Ryan said something like that. Amanda took a bite of her salad and continued in a calm, reassuring tone. "It's actually very common, especially after 60. 66, I thought, but I didn't correct her. Instead, I stared down at my coffee mug. "Sometimes I do feel a little foggy," I admitted quietly. Amanda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Really?" "Yes," I said slowly, "especially in the mornings." She watched me closely now. "That's important information," she said. "Important?" The word made my skin crawl. "Ryan has a doctor appointment scheduled for you next week," she continued. "Just a routine evaluation." I looked up with what I hoped was mild confusion. "A doctor appointment?" "Yes." She gave me a reassuring smile. "It's just to check how your memory is doing." I nodded vaguely. "Oh, right." Amanda returned to her salad, but I could see something in her posture. Excitement. Not worry. Not concern. Excitement. I felt a quiet wave of anger rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. Let her think the plan was working. Let both of them believe I was exactly what they wanted me to be. That evening, Ryan returned home around 6. I was sitting in the living room pretending to watch television when he walked in. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hi." He dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie. "How was your day?" I shrugged. "I think I watered the plants." "You think?" I blinked slowly. "Or maybe I did that yesterday." Ryan chuckled lightly. "Well, the plants look happy." Amanda entered the room a moment later. "Nicole said she's been feeling foggy lately," she told him. Ryan looked at me quickly. "Really?" I nodded. "Just a little." For a moment, something like relief crossed his face. Then he masked it with concern. "That's exactly why those vitamins are important," he said gently. I forced a weak smile. "Yes, the vitamins." Dinner that night was quiet. Ryan talked about a house he had shown to potential buyers. Amanda discussed a marketing campaign at work. I nodded at appropriate moments, occasionally asking questions. And twice I deliberately repeated something they had already said. Each time, Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Amanda. Silent confirmation. They believed the pills were working. After dinner, Ryan helped clear the dishes. Then around 10 o'clock, he knocked on my bedroom door, just like he had every night for months. "Mom?" "Yes." He stepped inside holding the small orange bottle. The same bottle I had trusted for so long. Vitamin time. My heart beat faster, but my face remained calm. Ryan shook 2 pills into his palm and handed them to me along with a glass of water. "Here you go." I took them. For a moment, I looked at the small white tablets resting in my hand, the same pills Greg had identified that morning. Then I placed them in my mouth, took a sip of water, and pretended to swallow. Ryan watched carefully, just like he always did. "Good," he said with a satisfied nod. "Consistency is important." I smiled faintly. "Yes, consistency." A moment later, he turned and left the room. I waited until his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Then I walked into the bathroom, leaned over the sink, and quietly spit the pills into my hand. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror. This time I didn't look confused. I looked determined, because Ryan believed he was slowly taking control of my life. What he didn't realize yet was that every night he handed me those pills, he was also handing me another opportunity, another piece of evidence, another chance to understand exactly how far he was willing to go. And the more I watched him, the more I realized something that made the situation even darker. Ryan and Amanda weren't just hoping the pills would make me look forgetful. They were already planning what would happen next. Over the next few days, I settled into a strange new routine. Every evening around 10 o'clock, Ryan would knock on my door with the same gentle voice. "Vitamin time, Mom." And every evening, I would repeat the same quiet performance. Take the pills. Pretend to swallow. Wait until he left. Spit them out. At first, my hands trembled slightly each time I did it. The idea of deceiving my own son felt unnatural, almost surreal. But the more I watched Ryan and Amanda, the easier it became, because the truth was becoming clearer every day. They were no longer hiding their plan as carefully as they thought. Ryan, for example, had started talking more openly about my memory problems. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone in the kitchen. "I'm telling you," he said to someone, "she's been getting worse the last few months." He paused, listening. "No, the doctor appointment is next week. That should give us the official evaluation." Another pause. "Yeah, guardianship." The word sent a cold shiver down my spine again. Guardianship was no longer just a possibility. It was the direction they were actively moving toward. Later that same evening, Amanda joined me in the living room while Ryan was still out showing properties. She sat across from me with her laptop open, typing something quickly. I pretended to focus on the television, but after a few minutes I spoke. "Amanda," she looked up. "Yes. Did we have dinner already?" For a moment she studied me. "No, not yet." "Oh." I nodded slowly as if trying to process that information. "Right." She watched me for another moment before returning to her laptop. But I noticed something important. She didn't look worried. She looked encouraged. The more forgetful I appeared, the more confident she seemed to become. That realization made something inside me harden. These weren't people trying to help an aging parent. They were investors watching their strategy succeed. 2 days later, Ryan reminded me about the doctor appointment. "Don't forget," he said during breakfast, "your memory evaluation is Thursday morning." I frowned slightly. "Evaluation?" "Just a checkup," he said quickly. Amanda added from the kitchen. "It's routine." I nodded slowly. "Oh, right." Ryan seemed satisfied with that answer. But inside my mind was racing. This appointment was clearly important to them. If the doctor believed Ryan's story that I was confused, forgetful, unable to care for myself, it could become official medical documentation. Exactly the kind Amanda had mentioned to him in the hallway that night. Exactly the kind of record a court might use to approve guardianship, which meant the appointment wasn't just a doctor's visit. It was part of their evidence. Thursday arrived faster than I expected. Ryan drove me to the clinic himself. The building was modern and bright with large windows and clean white walls. As we sat in the waiting room, Ryan filled out paperwork at the reception desk. I watched him carefully. He seemed relaxed, confident, almost cheerful. Finally, a nurse called my name. "Nicole Lewis." Ryan stood up quickly. "That's us." The nurse led us down a quiet hallway into a small examination room. "Dr. Patel will be with you shortly," she said. Ryan sat in the chair beside the exam table while I sat on the edge of it. He gave me a reassuring smile. "Nothing to worry about, Mom." A few minutes later, the doctor entered. Dr. Patel was a man in his early 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. He shook my hand. "Mrs. Lewis, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too," I said. He turned to Ryan. "And you must be the son." Ryan nodded. "Ryan Lewis." Dr. Patel sat down with a clipboard. "So Ryan mentioned some concerns about memory changes recently." I lowered my eyes slightly. "Sometimes I forget things," I said quietly. Ryan leaned forward. "It's been happening more often lately," he added. Dr. Patel looked at me thoughtfully. "Can you give me an example?" Ryan answered before I could. "She repeats questions. Sometimes she forgets conversations we had earlier the same day." Dr. Patel raised a hand gently. "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Lewis directly." Ryan leaned back. "Of course." The doctor turned back to me. "Nicole, how do you feel your memory has been?" This was the moment I had been preparing for. If I acted completely normal, Ryan might become suspicious. But if I acted too confused, the doctor might believe his story. I needed to walk a very careful line. "I sometimes lose track of things," I said slowly. Dr. Patel nodded. "That can happen for many reasons. Stress, sleep problems, medications." The word medications made my chest tighten. Ryan spoke again. "She's been taking memory support vitamins I bought her." Dr. Patel looked at him briefly. "Supplements can help sometimes, but they're not always necessary." He turned back to me. "I'm going to ask you a few simple questions, Nicole." I nodded. He began with basic ones. "What year is it?" 2026. "What city are we in?" "Seattle." "Can you remember 3 words for me? Apple train, blue?" I repeated them back. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did it slowly but correctly. Ryan shifted slightly in his chair. Dr. Patel asked a few more questions. Then he looked at his notes. "Ryan, you mentioned episodes of confusion." Ryan nodded. "Yes, she sometimes forgets meals or repeats stories." Dr. Patel looked thoughtful. "Nicole, Do you feel capable of managing your finances and daily life? I hesitated briefly, just enough to make Ryan lean forward. I think so, I said. Dr. Patel studied my face carefully. Then he wrote something on his clipboard. Ryan spoke again. Doctor, do you think she might be developing early dementia? Dr. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me again. Nicole, are you currently taking any prescription medications? My heart pounded. For a split second, I considered telling him everything right there. The pills, the sedatives, Ryan's plan. But if I did that now, without evidence, Ryan would immediately know I had discovered the truth. And that would destroy the advantage I had been carefully building. So I shook my head. No prescriptions. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. Based on this brief evaluation, I don't see clear signs of severe cognitive impairment. Ryan blinked. But the confusion could have many explanations, the doctor interrupted calmly. Stress, fatigue, even normal aging. Ryan's posture stiffened slightly. Dr. Patel continued writing. I'd like to schedule a follow-up evaluation in a few months. But right now, I don't see enough evidence to diagnose dementia. Ryan forced a polite smile. I see. The appointment ended a few minutes later. As we walked back through the clinic hallway, I could feel Ryan's mood shift beside me. He was quieter, tighter. Once we reached the parking lot, he finally spoke. Well, he said, unlocking the car that didn't go exactly the way I expected. I tilted my head slightly. What do you mean? Ryan hesitated. Nothing. Just the doctor wants more observation. I nodded slowly. Oh. But inside, something had become very clear. Ryan had expected the doctor to confirm his story. And when that didn't happen, his plan had just become more complicated. Over the next few days, I settled into a strange new routine. Every evening around 10 o'clock, Ryan would knock on my door with the same gentle voice. Vitamin time, Mom. And every evening, I would repeat the same quiet performance. Take the pills. Pretend to swallow. Wait until he left. Spit them out. At first, my hands trembled slightly each time I did it. The idea of deceiving my own son felt unnatural, almost surreal. But the more I watched Ryan and Amanda, the easier it became, because the truth was becoming clearer every day. They were no longer hiding their plan as carefully as they thought. Ryan, for example, had started talking more openly about my memory problems. One afternoon, I overheard him on the phone in the kitchen. I'm telling you, he said to someone she's been getting worse the last few months. He paused, listening. No. The doctor appointment is next week. That should give us the official evaluation. Another pause. Yeah, guardianship. The word sent a cold shiver down my spine again. Guardianship was no longer just a possibility. It was the direction they were actively moving toward. Later that same evening, Amanda joined me in the living room while Ryan was still out showing properties. She sat across from me with her laptop open, typing something quickly. I pretended to focus on the television, but after a few minutes, I spoke. Amanda, she looked up. Yes. Did we have dinner already? For a moment, she studied me. No, not yet. Oh. I nodded slowly as if trying to process that information. Right. She watched me for another moment before returning to her laptop. But I noticed something important. She didn't look worried. She looked encouraged. The more forgetful I appeared, the more confident she seemed to become. That realization made something inside me harden. These weren't people trying to help an aging parent. They were investors watching their strategies succeed. 2 days later, Ryan reminded me about the doctor appointment. Don't forget, he said during breakfast, your memory evaluation is Thursday morning. I frowned slightly. Evaluation. Just a checkup, he said quickly. Amanda added from the kitchen. It's routine. I nodded slowly. Oh, right. Ryan seemed satisfied with that answer. But inside my mind was racing. This appointment was clearly important to them. If the doctor believed Ryan's story that I was confused, forgetful, unable to care for myself, it could become official medical documentation. Exactly the kind Amanda had mentioned to him in the hallway that night. Exactly the kind of record a court might use to approve guardianship. Which meant the appointment wasn't just a doctor's visit. It was part of their evidence. Thursday arrived faster than I expected. Ryan drove me to the clinic himself. The building was modern and bright with large windows and clean white walls. As we sat in the waiting room, Ryan filled out paperwork at the reception desk. I watched him carefully. He seemed relaxed, confident, almost cheerful. Finally, a nurse called my name. Nicole Lewis. Ryan stood up quickly. That's us. The nurse led us down a quiet hallway into a small examination room. Dr. Patel will be with you shortly, she said. Ryan sat in the chair beside the exam table while I sat on the edge of it. He gave me a reassuring smile. Nothing to worry about, Mom. A few minutes later, the doctor entered. Dr. Patel was a man in his early 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. He shook my hand. "Mrs. Lewis, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too," I said. He turned to Ryan. "And you must be the son." Ryan nodded. "Ryan Lewis." Dr. Patel sat down with a clipboard. "So Ryan mentioned some concerns about memory changes recently." I lowered my eyes slightly. "Sometimes I forget things," I said quietly. Ryan leaned forward. "It's been happening more often lately," he added. Dr. Patel looked at me thoughtfully. "Can you give me an example?" Ryan answered before I could. "She repeats questions. Sometimes she forgets conversations we had earlier the same day." Dr. Patel raised a hand gently. "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Lewis directly." Ryan leaned back. "Of course." The doctor turned back to me. "Nicole, how do you feel your memory has been?" This was the moment I had been preparing for. If I acted completely normal, Ryan might become suspicious. But if I acted too confused, the doctor might believe his story. I needed to walk a very careful line. "I sometimes lose track of things," I said slowly. Dr. Patel nodded. "That can happen for many reasons. Stress, sleep problems, medications." The word medications made my chest tighten. Ryan spoke again. "She's been taking memory support vitamins I bought her." Dr. Patel looked at him briefly. "Supplements can help sometimes, but they're not always necessary." He turned back to me. "I'm going to ask you a few simple questions, Nicole." I nodded. He began with basic ones. "What year is it?" 2026. "What city are we in?" "Seattle." "Can you remember 3 words for me? Apple train blue?" I repeated them back. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did it slowly but correctly. Ryan shifted slightly in his chair. Dr. Patel asked a few more questions. Then he looked at his notes. "Ryan, you mentioned episodes of confusion." Ryan nodded. "Yes, she sometimes forgets meals or repeats stories." Dr. Patel looked thoughtful. "Nicole, do you feel capable of managing your finances and daily life?" I hesitated briefly, just enough to make Ryan lean forward. "I think so," I said. Dr. Patel studied my face carefully. Then he wrote something on his clipboard. Ryan spoke again. "Doctor, do you think she might be developing early dementia?" Dr. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me again. "Nicole, are you currently taking any prescription medications?" My heart pounded. For a split second, I considered telling him everything right there. The pills, the sedatives, Ryan's plan. But if I did that now without evidence, Ryan would immediately know I had discovered the truth. And that would destroy the advantage I had been carefully building. So I shook my head. "No prescriptions." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "Based on this brief evaluation, I don't see clear signs of severe cognitive impairment." Ryan blinked. "But the confusion could have many explanations," the doctor interrupted calmly. "Stress, fatigue, even normal aging." Ryan's posture stiffened slightly. Dr. Patel continued writing. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up evaluation in a few months, but right now I don't see enough evidence to diagnose dementia." Ryan forced a polite smile. "I see." The appointment ended a few minutes later. As we walked back through the clinic hallway, I could feel Ryan's mood shift beside me. He was quieter, tighter. Once we reached the parking lot, he finally spoke. "Well," he said, unlocking the car that didn't go exactly the way I expected. I tilted my head slightly. "What do you mean?" Ryan hesitated. "Nothing. Just, the doctor wants more observation." I nodded slowly. "Oh." But inside, something had become very clear. Ryan had expected the doctor to confirm his story. And when that didn't happen, his plan had just become more complicated. The drive home from the clinic was unusually quiet. Ryan kept both hands on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Normally, he liked to fill silence with conversation stories about houses. He was selling small jokes, observations about traffic. But that afternoon, he barely spoke. I watched him from the corner of my eye. His jaw looked tight. His fingers gripped the steering wheel a little harder than usual. The doctor's words had clearly unsettled him. Dr. Patel hadn't confirmed dementia. He hadn't agreed that I was incapable of managing my life. And most importantly, he hadn't created the official medical documentation Ryan seemed to be expecting. That single detail had shifted something in Ryan's plan. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Ryan turned off the engine and sat there for a moment before speaking. "Well," he said carefully, "the doctor just wants to monitor things." I nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable." Ryan studied my face. "You don't seem worried." I gave a small shrug. Should I be? He hesitated. No, it's just, sometimes people don't realize their memory is declining. There it was again. The narrative he was trying to build. I lowered my eyes slightly, playing the part. Maybe you're right. Ryan seemed satisfied with that response. Let's just keep an eye on things, he said. We got out of the car and walked inside. Amanda was already home, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. She looked up as soon as we entered. Well, she asked. Ryan dropped his keys on the counter. The doctor wants to observe for a while. Amanda's smile faded slightly. What does that mean? He said there's no clear sign of dementia yet, Ryan replied. Amanda's expression tightened. Yet, Ryan nodded. He wants a follow-up evaluation in a few months. Amanda leaned back in her chair, clearly disappointed. That's not what we needed. For a moment, they seemed to forget I was standing in the room. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. It's fine, we just need more documentation. Amanda glanced toward me quickly before lowering her voice. But the lawyer said medical confirmation would make the guardianship petition much easier. Ryan sighed. I know. I slowly walked toward the kitchen as if the conversation no longer concerned me. But every word they exchanged sank into my memory. Guardianship petition, lawyer, documentation. The plan was still moving forward, just slower than they had hoped. That evening, after dinner, Ryan spent most of his time in his home office upstairs. I could hear his voice through the partially closed door while he spoke on the phone. Yes, he said, the doctor wants to wait. A pause. No, she still seems confused sometimes. Another pause. I've been documenting everything. Documenting. Amanda's notebook suddenly came back to my mind. Over the past few months, I had seen her writing things down occasionally. At the time, I assumed it was work-related. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, Ryan left early for a property showing, and Amanda went to the office downtown. For the first time in days, I had the house entirely to myself. And that gave me an opportunity. I moved slowly through the house, listening carefully. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. Finally, I walked upstairs. Ryan and Amanda's bedroom door was slightly open. Inside the room was perfectly organized. Amanda's side of the dresser held neat rows of cosmetics. Ryan's desk sat near the window overlooking the street. I hesitated for a moment. Going through their things felt like crossing a line. But then I remembered the pills, the lies, the quiet way they had spoken about selling my home. My hesitation disappeared. I stepped inside. Ryan's desk drawer opened easily. Inside were several folders and stacks of printed papers. Most of them were property listings, real estate contracts, nothing unusual. But when I opened the second drawer, I found something different. A thin blue folder labeled *** Lewis Property. Documents ***. My heart began beating faster. I opened it carefully. Inside were printed emails, real estate market evaluations, and one document that made my hands freeze, a property valuation report for my house. The address was printed clearly across the top. Below it, the estimated market value was listed, $780,000. I stared at the number. When Thomas and I bought this house decades ago, it had cost less than $100,000. Seattle's housing market had exploded since then. Apparently, Ryan knew exactly how valuable it had become. But what frightened me more was the document clipped behind the valuation report. A draft listing agreement, prepared but not yet signed. The seller's name section was blank, but the property description was unmistakable. My house. Ryan had already begun preparing to sell it. My hands trembled slightly as I placed the papers back into the folder. Then I noticed something else in the drawer. A small notebook. Amanda's. The same one I had seen her writing in. I opened it slowly. The first page contained a list of dates. Each date was followed by short notes. Nicole repeated breakfast question twice. Nicole forgot where keys were. Nicole asked same story again during dinner. My chest tightened. They weren't just observing my behavior. They were recording it, building a timeline. Page after page contained similar entries, evidence they could show a lawyer or a judge. Near the back of the notebook, I saw another entry written just 2 days earlier. Nicole appeared disoriented this morning, asked if she had already eaten lunch. That had been the moment I intentionally pretended to forget. Amanda had written it down immediately. I flipped another page. The final note made my stomach drop. After doctor evaluation, Ryan says we still need stronger documentation for guardianship petition. Stronger documentation. My mind raced. If the doctor wouldn't confirm dementia, then Ryan and Amanda would simply try to create more evidence. More confusion. More incidents. More reasons to convince a court that I couldn't manage my own life. I closed the notebook carefully and placed it exactly where I had found it. Then I returned everything else to the drawer. When I left the bedroom and walked back downstairs, my thoughts were spinning. Ryan wasn't just planning to sell the house. He was preparing for the moment when he would legally control it. Which meant guardianship was not just an idea. It was the central piece of his entire plan. And once he obtained it, I wouldn't be able to stop him. He could sell the house, move me into a nursing facility, control every dollar I owned. My entire future could be decided by someone who had already proven he was willing to drug me. I sat down in the living room, staring at the quiet walls of the house Thomas and I had built our life in. For the first time since discovering the truth, a heavy realization settled in my chest. Ryan wasn't just trying to convince people I was confused. He was preparing to take everything. And unless I stopped him soon, he might actually succeed. That afternoon, I sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the quiet walls of my house. The house Thomas and I had built our life in. The place where Ryan had taken his first steps. Where birthday parties had filled the rooms with laughter. Where we had celebrated holidays for decades. And now, according to the documents I had just seen upstairs, it had become something else. A financial opportunity. $780,000. That number kept repeating in my mind. It explained everything. Why Ryan had suddenly become so concerned about me living alone. Why Amanda had asked about my savings. Why they were pushing so hard for guardianship. It wasn't about helping me. It was about controlling what I owned. The thought felt like a heavy stone sitting in my chest. For several minutes, I considered something dangerous. Confronting Ryan immediately. Walking upstairs. Throwing the folder on the table. Demanding an explanation. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how foolish that would be. Ryan had already shown he was willing to lie, willing to drug me. If I confronted him without proof strong enough to stop him legally, he would simply deny everything. And after that, he would become much more careful. My only advantage right now was that Ryan believed I knew nothing, which meant I needed help. Real help. Someone who understood the law. Someone who could tell me how to protect myself. But who could I trust? Most of our extended family lived out of state. My sister lived in Arizona. Thomas's brother lived in Texas. They were far away and unfamiliar with what was happening here. Then suddenly one name came to mind, Emily Carter. Emily was my niece, my older sister's daughter. She lived about 30 minutes away in Bellevue and worked as a *** paralegal, ** at a law firm. Emily had always been sharp, observant. Even as a child, she had the habit of noticing things other people missed. And more importantly, she understood legal processes. If anyone could help me understand what Ryan was trying to do, it would be her. I picked up my phone and stared at her contact information for a moment. Part of me still hesitated. Calling Emily would mean admitting something I never imagined I would say out loud. That my own son was trying to take control of my life. But the situation had already gone too far for silence. I pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before Emily answered. Aunt Nicole. Her voice sounded cheerful and surprised. Hi, Emily. Well, this is a nice surprise, she said. Everything okay? For a moment, I didn't know how to begin. I need to ask you something, I said carefully. Her tone shifted immediately. What's wrong? Do you have time to talk today? Of course. Maybe in person. There was a short pause. Are you safe? She asked. The question startled me. Yes, I said quickly. I just need advice. Okay, Emily said. I can meet you this afternoon. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop halfway between our homes. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. For the first time since discovering Ryan's plan, I wasn't completely alone. 2 hours later, I sat across from Emily at a corner table in the cafe. She arrived wearing a dark blazer and carrying a leather briefcase. Her brown hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and her expression was already serious before I even spoke. What's going on? She asked. I took a deep breath. Emily, I think Ryan is trying to convince people I'm losing my mind. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. What do you mean? And then I told her everything. The vitamins. The conversation I overheard in the hallway. The pharmacy visit with Greg. The sedative pills. The doctor appointment. Amanda's notebook. Ryan's property documents. The planned guardianship. Emily didn't interrupt me once. She simply listened. The more I spoke, the more her expression hardened. By the time I finished, she was leaning forward with her elbows on the table. Aunt Nicole, she said quietly, this is extremely serious. I know. Do you still have the pills? Yes. And the medication information the pharmacist printed? I nodded. Emily exhaled slowly. That's good. Good. It's evidence. The word sent a small ripple of hope through me. Evidence of what? She looked me directly in the eyes. Potential elder abuse? The phrase felt heavy in the air between us. Elder abuse. I had heard it on the news before. Stories about caregivers taking advantage of vulnerable seniors. But I had never imagined the term could apply to my own family. Emily continued. If Ryan is giving you prescription medication without your consent, that alone is a serious legal issue. And the guardianship, I asked. She nodded. Guardianship petitions require strong proof that a person is mentally incapable of managing their own affairs. I thought about Amanda's notebook again. They're trying to create that proof. Yes, Emily said. And the fact that they're documenting your behavior suggests they're already preparing for court. My stomach tightened. Could they succeed? Emily hesitated. If a judge believes you're incompetent, it's possible. What happens then? The court appoints a guardian, she explained. That person gains legal authority over your finances, property, and sometimes medical decisions. Ryan, I said quietly. Emily nodded. Yes, most likely. The thought made my hands feel cold. And if that happens, she continued, you would lose control over your own assets, including the house, everything Ryan had been working toward. Emily leaned back slightly. But right now, they don't have enough. Because of the doctor appointment. That helped, she said, but we need stronger protection. She smiled faintly. You didn't think I was going to let you handle this alone, did you? For the first time in days, I felt something inside my chest loosen. What should I do, I asked. Emily thought for a moment. First, keep pretending you don't know anything. I've been doing that. Good. Second, we need documentation. What kind? Recordings, she said. Recordings. If Ryan and Amanda are openly discussing their plan, capturing those conversations could become powerful evidence. I considered that. I might be able to do that. Emily nodded. And third? She paused. We should involve a lawyer. A lawyer. Yes, someone who specializes in elder law and guardianship cases. Do you know anyone? Emily smiled slightly. I work for one. That sentence felt like a small lifeline. What's his name? David Kaplan, she said. Is he good? Emily laughed quietly. He's the best attorney in our firm when it comes to guardianship disputes. I felt my shoulders relax a little. So what happens next? Emily looked thoughtful. Right now we gather evidence. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small device, a digital voice recorder. Start carrying this, she said. If they talk about their plan again, capture it. I took the recorder carefully. It felt small, but suddenly it also felt powerful. Because Ryan believed he was slowly building a case against me. What he didn't realize was that I had just begun building one against him. When I returned home from meeting Emily, the small voice recorder sat quietly inside my purse. It felt heavier than it actually was. Not because of its size, but because of what it represented. For months, Ryan and Amanda had been quietly gathering evidence against me. Now, for the first time, I was doing the same. The house was quiet when I walked inside. Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway yet, and Amanda hadn't returned from work. That gave me time to think. I walked slowly into the living room and sat in the same armchair where I had spent so many evenings, pretending to watch television while secretly studying their behavior. The recorder felt unfamiliar in my hand. Emily had shown me how it worked. One button, she said, slide it forward and it starts recording. Simple. But what I recorded with it could change everything. For a moment, doubt crept into my mind. Was I really about to record conversations with my own son? The boy I had raised. The boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged when he fell off his bicycle. But then I remembered the pills. The quiet conversation in the hallway. The folder with the listing agreement for my house. And the doubt disappeared. At 6 that evening, Ryan came home. I heard his car pull into the driveway, followed by the familiar sound of the front door opening. Mom, he called. In here, I replied. He walked into the living room, loosening his tie the way he always did after work. How was your day? Oh, I said vaguely, quiet. Ryan nodded and sat down on the couch across from me. He seemed to study my face for a moment. Feeling okay today? I shrugged. I think so. You seemed a little out of it yesterday after the doctor's appointment. Did I? Ryan nodded slowly. Just a little. I tilted my head as if trying to remember. I don't recall. Ryan watched me carefully. And for the first time since discovering his plan, I understood something important about the way he observed me. He wasn't just checking on me. He was evaluating me, looking for signs that his pills were doing their work. Amanda arrived shortly afterward. She entered the living room holding her laptop bag and kicked off her shoes near the door. "How was the clinic?" she asked Ryan. "Fine," he said. "The doctor wants more observation." Amanda sighed. "I was afraid of that." Ryan leaned forward slightly. "We just need to give it time." Amanda glanced toward me briefly before lowering her voice. "Did you tell him about the memory problems this week?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, I mentioned the repeated questions." Amanda seemed to relax. "Good." My heart beat a little faster. Without turning my head, I reached slowly into the pocket of my sweater and slid the recorder switch forward. The tiny device vibrated slightly as it began recording. Ryan continued speaking. "The doctor said it could still be early." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "Well, the lawyer already said documentation will help." Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Exactly. Once we have enough examples, the guardianship petition will be much stronger." Hearing the words spoken so plainly still made my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. Amanda lowered her voice further. "And after that," Ryan finished her sentence quietly, "the house." Silence filled the room for a moment. Amanda spoke again. "You're sure about the valuation?" Ryan nodded. $780,000. Amanda let out a small whistle. "That's incredible." Ryan's voice turned practical. "If we sell within the year, the market is still strong." "And your mom," Amanda asked. Ryan shrugged. "Once the guardianship is approved, we'll move her somewhere comfortable." Somewhere comfortable. The way he said it made it sound like he was discussing furniture placement. Amanda nodded slowly. An assisted living facility would make sense. Ryan agreed. "Exactly." My fingers tightened slightly around the arm of my chair. They were talking about moving me out of my own life as if it were an ordinary business decision. Amanda glanced toward me again. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Ryan looked at me briefly. "No." He sounded completely confident. "She barely remembers conversations from earlier in the day." Amanda smiled faintly. "Those pills are really working then?" Ryan nodded. "Just enough." Amanda leaned back. "Good. Because if she suddenly became suspicious, everything would get complicated." Ryan chuckled softly. "She won't." Hearing that certainty in his voice did something strange to me. For a moment I didn't feel angry. I felt calm, because the more confident Ryan became, the more freely he spoke. And every word he spoke was now being recorded. The conversation shifted a few minutes later when Amanda stood up. "I'm starving," she said. "What do you want for dinner?" Ryan stood too. "Anything easy." They moved into the kitchen, continuing their discussion about groceries and weekend plans. I sat quietly in the living room for several more minutes. Then I reached into my pocket and slid the recorder switch back. The device stopped recording with a soft click. My hands trembled slightly as I held it, because inside that small piece of plastic was the first real proof of what Ryan and Amanda were doing. Their voices, their plan, their own words. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt something close to relief. They had underestimated me, and because of that mistake, they had just given me exactly what Emily said we needed: evidence. Later that night, when Ryan brought me the pills again, the routine continued exactly as before. Vitamin time, Mom. I took them, pretended to swallow, watched him leave, then spit them quietly into my hand. But this time, something was different. I no longer felt like a victim hiding from danger. I felt like someone preparing for a battle, because Ryan believed he was slowly building a case against me. What he didn't know was that I had just recorded the first piece of the truth that could destroy his entire plan, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm. For weeks, maybe even months, I had been drifting through my own life in a fog created by someone else's intentions. But now, the fog had lifted. I knew what Ryan and Amanda were doing, and more importantly, I knew how they were doing it. The pills, the notes, the conversations. And now, for the first time, I had something they didn't know about: the recording. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and listened to the birds outside the window while replaying the previous evening in my mind. Ryan's voice, Amanda's quiet agreement, their casual discussion about selling the house, about moving me somewhere comfortable. The memory of those words still hurt, but the pain was slowly transforming into something else: determination. Around 8 o'clock, Ryan came downstairs already dressed for work. "Morning, Mom," he said. "Morning." He poured himself coffee and glanced at me. "You sleep okay?" "I think so," I said slowly. Ryan nodded. "Good." Amanda joined us a few minutes later, holding her phone and scrolling through emails. Neither of them seemed suspicious. Neither of them had any idea that their private conversation from the night before was now saved on a small device hidden in my purse. Ryan finished his coffee quickly. "I've got a meeting with the lawyer this afternoon," he said casually. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. "What lawyer?" Ryan shrugged lightly. "Just something work-related." Amanda gave him a quick glance, but neither of them elaborated. A few minutes later, they both left the house. As soon as the front door closed, I reached for my purse. My hands moved carefully as I took out the recorder. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Then I pressed the playback button. Ryan's voice filled the quiet kitchen. Asterisk. "Once the guardianship is approved, we'll move her somewhere comfortable. Asterisk." Amanda's voice followed. Asterisk. "Those pills are really working then. Asterisk." Listening to it again sent a chill down my spine. But this time the words also carried power. Because those voices were proof. I called Emily immediately. She answered after 2 rings. "Aunt Nicole, I have something," I said. "What kind of something?" "A recording." There was a brief silence. "You recorded them?" she asked. "Yes." "What did they say?" I hesitated. "Enough." Emily didn't waste a second. "Can you bring it to the office today?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "David needs to hear this." 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room at the law firm where Emily worked. The room was sleek and professional with a long wooden table and tall windows overlooking the city. Emily sat beside me. Across the table sat a man in his late 50s, wearing a dark suit and thin glasses. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, politely extending his hand, "I'm David Kaplan." I shook his hand. "Thank you for meeting with me." Emily slid the recorder across the table. "This is the recording I mentioned." David pressed the playback button. The room filled with Ryan's voice. For the next few minutes, none of us spoke. We simply listened. Ryan talking about guardianship, Amanda confirming the plan. Their conversation about selling my house. When the recording ended, David leaned back slightly in his chair. "Well," he said quietly. Emily looked at him. "That's pretty clear, right?" David nodded slowly. "Yes." He turned to me. "Mrs. Lewis, what you've described and what we just heard raises serious legal concerns." "What kind of concerns?" I asked. "Potential elder abuse," he said calmly. The phrase sounded even heavier coming from a lawyer. David continued. "Administering medication without someone's informed consent can be considered abuse, especially when it's done to manipulate mental capacity." Emily nodded. "And the guardianship plan." David folded his hands. "That recording strongly suggests they're intentionally trying to create the appearance that you're mentally incompetent, so they can control my property," I said. "Yes." A quiet anger flickered in his eyes. "I've handled cases like this before," he added. "Unfortunately, it's not uncommon." Hearing that was strangely unsettling. "You mean families do this often?" "Sometimes," he said carefully. "But in your case, we now have something extremely valuable." "The recording," Emily said. David nodded. "Yes." He tapped the recorder lightly. "This demonstrates intent." "Intent?" I asked. "Yes," he explained. "It shows they are deliberately planning to pursue guardianship and control your assets." I thought about Ryan's meeting with the lawyer that afternoon. He said he was meeting a lawyer today, I told them. Emily and David exchanged a glance. "That means the process may already be starting," David said. "What should I do?" I asked. David leaned forward. "First, continue exactly as you have been, pretending I don't know anything." "Yes." "Second, continue documenting everything." Emily nodded. More recordings would help. "And third," David said, "we prepare for the possibility that Ryan will file a guardianship petition." "What happens if he does?" David's voice remained calm. "We challenge it." "How?" "With evidence." He gestured toward the recorder. "Evidence like this." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a small sense of control. Not safety. Not yet. But control. David continued explaining the process. If Ryan files a guardianship petition, the court will schedule a hearing. And then, both sides present evidence. I thought about Amanda's notebook again. "They've been documenting my behavior." David nodded. "And we will present proof that those behaviors were artificially created." "The pills," Emily said. "Yes," David confirmed. "And the recordings." I exhaled slowly. "So this isn't over." "No," David said. "But you now have a strong defense." Emily smiled slightly. "And Ryan has no idea." That part felt almost surreal. Ryan believed he was slowly tightening control over my life. But in reality, the truth was beginning to gather against him. And when the time came to reveal it, everything he had been planning might collapse. 2 weeks later, Ryan filed the guardianship petition. I didn't learn about it from him. I learned about it from a certified letter delivered to my front door on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and stamped with the seal of the county court. For a moment, I simply stared at it. Even though David had warned me this might happen, holding that envelope in my hands made everything suddenly real. Ryan wasn't just planning to take control of my life. He had officially asked the court for permission to do it. I opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the documents inside. The legal language was cold and formal. Asterisk, asterisk. Petition for guardianship of Nicole Lewis. Asterisk, asterisk. My name appeared again and again across the pages. According to the petition, Ryan Lewis, my son, was requesting to be appointed my legal guardian. The reason listed was simple. Asterisk, asterisk, cognitive decline and inability to manage personal and financial affairs. Asterisk, asterisk. Attached to the petition were several supporting statements. Ryan's description of my memory problems, examples of confusion, repeated questions, forgotten tasks. Every single one of those incidents came directly from Amanda's notebook. Reading it felt surreal. Moments I had intentionally staged to fool them had now been turned into official accusations about my mental health. If I hadn't known the truth, the story would have sounded convincing. But the most unsettling part of the document wasn't the accusations. It was the request at the end. Ryan was asking the court to grant him authority over my finances, my property, my medical decisions, my residence. In other words, my entire life. I folded the papers carefully and placed them back in the envelope. Then I called David. It happened, I said, when he answered. Ryan filed the petition. Yes. David's voice remained calm. Good. I blinked. Good. Yes, he said, because now we can respond. Within a few hours, Emily and I were sitting in David's office again, the guardianship petition spread across the desk between us. David adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents. They're presenting the exact narrative we expected, he said. Emily pointed to one page. These examples are all from Amanda's notes. David nodded. Yes. He looked up at me. How are you feeling about all this? I thought about the question carefully. Angry, I said. More than scared. David gave a small approving nod. That's understandable. He tapped the petition. But remember something important. What? The burden of proof is on them. What does that mean? It means Ryan must convince the court that you are truly incapable of managing your life. And if he can't, then the petition fails. Emily leaned forward. And we have evidence they don't know about. David nodded again. Yes. He pulled a folder from his desk. Inside were printed transcripts of the recording I had made. Ryan's voice. Amanda's voice. Their plan. If they pushed this case to court, David said this evidence could completely change the outcome. The court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. 3 weeks. That meant I had to continue pretending everything was normal while Ryan prepared his case against me. Those 3 weeks felt longer than the previous 3 months combined. Ryan and Amanda behaved exactly as they always had. Ryan continued bringing the pills every night. Amanda continued writing in her notebook. And every so often, Ryan would casually ask questions designed to make me appear forgetful. Did you remember to pay the electricity bill, Mom? Do you recall what day it is? Did you already eat lunch? Each time I played the role they expected. Confused. Uncertain. Harmless. Meanwhile, the recorder in my pocket captured more conversations, more pieces of their plan, more evidence. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom felt colder than I expected. The walls were tall and formal, lined with dark wood panels. A judge's bench stood at the front of the room, elevated above the rest of us. Ryan sat at one table with Amanda and his lawyer. I sat at the opposite table with David and Emily. Ryan glanced toward me briefly. His expression was calm, confident. He believed this was the final step in his plan. The judge entered the room a few minutes later and everyone stood. After the brief opening formalities, Ryan's lawyer began presenting their case. He spoke calmly and professionally. Your Honor, Mr. Ryan Lewis is deeply concerned about the well-being of his mother, Nicole Lewis. Ryan nodded solemnly beside him. The lawyer continued. Over the past several months, Mrs. Lewis has demonstrated significant cognitive decline. He handed the judge a stack of documents. These are documented examples of confusion, repeated questions, and memory lapses. Amanda's notebook. Ryan's statements. The narrative they had carefully constructed. For several minutes, the lawyer described me as if I were someone fragile and lost, someone who needed protection, someone who could no longer manage her own life. Ryan even took the stand briefly. His performance was impressive. Concerned son, worried voice, gentle tone. I just want what's best for my mother, he said. For a moment, if I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him. Finally, the judge turned toward our table. Mr. Kaplan, she said. David stood calmly. Your Honor, the defense would like to present evidence. Ryan's lawyer looked slightly irritated. Go ahead, the judge said. David placed a small device on the table in front of her. The recorder. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. Amanda leaned forward. What is that? Ryan's lawyer asked. David spoke clearly. A recording. Ryan shifted in his chair. A recording of what the lawyer asked. David pressed the play button. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom. Asterisk. Once the guardianship is approved, we'll move her somewhere comfortable. Asterisk. Amanda's voice followed. Asterisk. Those pills are really working then. Asterisk. Ryan's face drained of color. Amanda's mouth opened slightly. The courtroom fell completely silent as the recording continued. Their conversation. Their plan. Their own words describing exactly what they intended to do. When the recording ended, no one spoke for several seconds. The judge looked slowly from the recorder to Ryan. Mr. Lewis, she said calmly, would you like to explain what we just heard? Ryan didn't answer. Because for the first time since this nightmare began, his carefully constructed story had started to collapse. The silence in the courtroom felt heavier than anything I had experienced in my entire life. Ryan sat frozen at the table across from me. The confident expression he had worn just minutes earlier was gone. In its place was something I had never seen on his face before. Fear. Amanda looked even worse. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale. The judge leaned back slightly in her chair, her expression unreadable. Mr. Lewis, she said again, calmly, I asked you a question. Ryan cleared his throat. I don't know what that recording is supposed to prove. His lawyer immediately leaned forward. Your Honor, he said quickly, we object to the use of this recording. We have not verified its authenticity. David didn't seem the least bit concerned. Your Honor, he replied calmly, we are prepared to provide the original device metadata and witness testimony confirming the recording. He gestured toward me. Mrs. Lewis recorded that conversation inside her own home. The judge nodded slowly. Objection noted, she said to Ryan's lawyer, but overruled for the moment. Ryan's lawyer leaned back, clearly frustrated. The judge turned her attention back to Ryan. Mr. Lewis, the voices on that recording sound very much like yours and your wife's. Ryan shifted in his chair. They might be taken out of context. The judge raised an eyebrow. Out of context? Ryan swallowed. We were just discussing possible future care options for my mother. Amanda nodded quickly. Yes, that's all it was. The judge tapped her pen lightly against the desk. Future care options that include administering medication without her knowledge. Ryan's lawyer quickly stood again. Your Honor, there has been no proof that any medication was administered improperly. David calmly opened a folder. Actually, there is. He placed several documents on the judge's desk. These are pharmacy records and medication identification documents confirming the pills Mrs. Lewis was being given were prescription sedatives. Ryan's head snapped toward me. For a brief moment, the mask he had been wearing cracked completely. Shock. Pure stunned shock. He hadn't expected that. The judge examined the documents carefully. Mr. Lewis, she said slowly, were you providing your mother with prescription sedatives? Ryan looked toward his lawyer. The lawyer whispered something to him. Ryan cleared his throat again. They were mild sleep aids. David spoke calmly. Your Honor, the medication in question is not an over-the-counter sleep aid. It is a prescription sedative commonly used for severe agitation and dementia patients. The judge looked back at Ryan. Did your mother have a prescription for this medication? Ryan hesitated. No. Amanda suddenly leaned forward. It wasn't dangerous, she said quickly. We were just trying to help her rest. The judge's gaze hardened slightly. You were administering prescription medication to someone without their consent. The courtroom fell silent again. Ryan's lawyer tried to recover. Your Honor, the intent here was clearly to care for Mrs. Lewis. My client was concerned about her mental state. David stepped forward again. Your Honor, if I may. The judge nodded. David turned slightly toward the courtroom. The guardianship petition claims Mrs. Lewis is incapable of managing her affairs due to cognitive decline. He paused. But the evidence we have presented shows that decline was artificially created. He gestured toward the medication documents. Mrs. Lewis was unknowingly given sedatives. Then toward the transcript. and her son openly discussed using those pills to support a guardianship petition. Ryan's lawyer shook his head. That interpretation is speculative. David smiled slightly. Then perhaps the court would like to hear the rest of the recordings. Ryan's head jerked up. Rest, he said. David looked directly at him. Yes. Amanda's face went pale. The judge folded her hands. You have additional recordings? Yes, Your Honor. Play them. David pressed another button on the recorder. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom again. Asterisk. The doctor just needs to see more confusion. Once we have enough examples, the guardianship petition will be much stronger. Asterisk. Amanda's voice followed. Asterisk. Those pills are really working then. Asterisk. The judge's expression did not change, but the tension in the room shifted dramatically. Ryan's lawyer closed his eyes briefly. Amanda stared at the table. Ryan looked as though someone had pulled the floor out from under him. When the recording ended, the judge spoke quietly. Mr. Lewis. Ryan didn't respond. Mr. Lewis, she repeated. He finally looked up. Yes. The judge's voice remained calm, but there was steel behind it now. The evidence presented raises extremely serious concerns. Ryan said nothing. Administering medication without consent. Manipulating perceived cognitive decline and filing a guardianship petition based on that manipulation could constitute elder abuse and fraud upon the court. The words landed like a hammer. Amanda's shoulders slumped. Ryan's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, we request a brief recess. The judge considered that for a moment. Denied. She turned back to Ryan. This court takes guardianship petitions very seriously. Ryan stared at the table. The purpose of guardianship law is to protect vulnerable individuals, not to allow family members to take control of assets. The judge glanced at the documents again. In light of the evidence presented today, the petition for guardianship is denied. Ryan closed his eyes. Amanda looked as if she might start crying. But the judge wasn't finished. She continued speaking. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential elder abuse charges. Ryan's lawyer immediately stood. Your Honor. The judge raised a hand. This hearing is concluded? She struck the gavel. The sharp sound echoed through the courtroom. Just like that, Ryan's plan, months of manipulation, deception, and careful planning had collapsed in less than an hour. As people began standing and gathering their things, Ryan slowly turned toward me. For the first time in my life, I saw my son not as the child I had raised, but as a man whose choices had finally caught up with him. The courthouse hallway felt strangely quiet after the tension of the courtroom. People walked past us carrying folders and briefcases, speaking in low voices about cases that had nothing to do with mine. But for me, the world felt as though it had slowed down. Ryan stood a few feet away near the wall, staring at the floor. Amanda stood beside him with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her usual polished confidence had disappeared completely. For the first time since this began, they looked uncertain, small, human. David gathered the documents from our table and slipped them back into his leather briefcase. Well, he said calmly, that went about as well as it could have. Emily gave me a quiet smile. You did great in there. I nodded slowly, but my attention was still fixed on Ryan. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward me. Amanda followed behind him, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Ryan stopped about 3 feet in front of me. For a moment, he didn't say anything. The boy I had raised stood there in silence, looking older than he had ever looked before. Finally, he spoke. Mom. His voice sounded rough. I waited. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. The words felt almost surreal. You didn't think drugging me would go this far? I asked quietly. Ryan winced. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He rubbed the back of his neck. I just needed money. The simplicity of the explanation stunned me. You needed money, I repeated. Ryan nodded. The real estate market slowed down this year. I had some investments that didn't work out. And that made it okay to poison your mother. Ryan's face tightened. They weren't poison. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest. You gave me prescription sedatives every night. They were mild, he said quickly. Amanda finally spoke. We weren't trying to hurt you. I looked at her. You were trying to convince a court I had dementia. Amanda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Ryan sighed. The house is worth almost $800,000, he said quietly. The blunt honesty of that statement took my breath away. So that's what I'm worth now, I asked. Ryan didn't answer. Emily stepped slightly closer to me, but she didn't interrupt. Ryan looked at the floor again. I thought, If we got guardianship, we could sell the house and move you somewhere nice. A nursing home. Assisted living, Amanda corrected weakly. I shook my head slowly. You were going to take my home. Ryan finally looked up at me. We would have taken care of you. The words sounded almost desperate. Taken care of me, I repeated. Yes, with money that belonged to me. Ryan didn't respond. For a moment, none of us spoke. The hallway buzzed quietly around us. Finally, I said the words that had been building in my chest for weeks. You betrayed me. Ryan's shoulders dropped. I know. You lied to me. I know. You drugged me. I said I'm sorry. The apology sounded small, fragile, like something that had come too late. I studied his face carefully. For a moment, I searched for the boy I remembered. The little boy who used to run into my arms after school. The teenager who once stayed up all night helping his father repair the fence in our backyard. But that boy wasn't standing in front of me anymore. Instead, there was a man who had looked at his mother and seen an opportunity. Ryan, I said quietly. Yes, I forgive you. His head lifted quickly. You do? Yes. Relief flashed across his face. But before he could speak again, I continued. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. The relief disappeared. What do you mean? I mean, you and Amanda are not coming back to my house. Ryan blinked. What? You need to move out. Amanda looked shocked. You're kicking us out. Yes. Ryan took a step forward. Mom, wait. No, I said calmly. You wanted control over my life. That's not. And now you've lost the privilege of being part of it. Ryan's face went pale. Where are we supposed to go? Amanda stared at me in disbelief. You're serious? Yes. Ryan looked like he was searching for words that wouldn't come. I said I was sorry. And I said I forgive you, I replied. But trust is different from forgiveness. The hallway fell silent again. Ryan's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You're really doing this? Yes. He stared at me for several seconds. Then something in his expression hardened. Fine, he said quietly. Amanda grabbed his arm. Ryan. But he pulled away. Let's go. They turned and walked down the hallway together. Neither of them looked back. I watched them disappear around the corner, and for a moment an unexpected wave of sadness washed over me. Not because of what had happened in court, but because somewhere along the way I had lost my son. Emily touched my arm gently. You okay? I nodded slowly. I think so. David closed his briefcase. You did the right thing. I looked down the empty hallway where Ryan had disappeared. For 66 years, I had believed that family meant unconditional trust. But sometimes the hardest lesson in life is realizing that trust must also have boundaries. And sometimes, those boundaries must be drawn by the very person who was betrayed. 3 months after the court hearing, the house finally became quiet again. Not the heavy, uneasy quiet that had filled the rooms while Ryan and Amanda were living there, but a different kind of silence. A peaceful one. The kind of quiet that lets you breathe. Ryan and Amanda moved out 2 days after the hearing. They packed their things quickly, avoiding long conversations. Amanda barely looked at me during those final hours, and Ryan seemed determined not to meet my eyes. The only thing he said before leaving was simple. I'll come back for the rest of my things later. But he never did. A moving company arrived a week afterward to collect the boxes he had left in the garage. And just like that, the house was mine again. For the first few days, I walked from room to room slowly, almost as if I were rediscovering a place I had forgotten. The living room. The kitchen. The hallway where Ryan had once measured his height against the wall as a child. Memories lived in every corner. Some of them were warm. Others hurt. But for the first time in months, none of those memories were being manipulated by someone else's plan. I was free to feel them honestly. Emily visited often during those weeks. She would bring coffee, sit at the kitchen table with me, and talk about ordinary things. Work, family, life. One afternoon, she asked gently, Have you decided what you want to do next? I looked around the kitchen. Thomas and I had built our entire life here. But now the house also carried the memory of everything that had happened with Ryan. I think it's time for a change, I said. Emily nodded thoughtfully. A fresh start. Yes. 2 weeks later, I listed the house for sale. It sold faster than I expected. Seattle's housing market was still strong, just like Ryan had predicted. The final price was slightly higher than the valuation he had found, $795,000. When the closing documents were signed, I felt something strange. Not sadness, not relief, something quieter, closure. Instead of staying in Seattle, I decided to move south. A small coastal town in California called **** Monterey ****. I had visited once with Thomas many years ago. We spent a weekend walking along the ocean, eating seafood by the harbor, and watching sea otters float lazily in the waves. He had loved that place. "You could grow old here," he told me once. At the time, I laughed. Now standing on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean, I realized he had been right. Life felt calmer here, slower. The air smelled like salt and sunlight. I began walking along the beach each morning. Sometimes I would sit on a bench near the water and watch the waves roll in, thinking about how strange life can be. 1 year earlier, I believed my biggest challenge would simply be learning how to live without my husband. I never imagined I would also have to survive betrayal from my own child, but surviving it had changed me. It had made me stronger, and it had also shown me something important. There were many other people facing similar situations. During my conversations with David and Emily, I had learned that elder abuse cases were far more common than most people realize. Many victims never discovered what was happening. Others discovered it too late. That thought stayed with me. So with Emily's help and David's legal guidance, I decided to do something unexpected. I used part of the money from the sale of my house to create a small foundation. The *** Lewis Family Trust for Elder Protection, ***. Its purpose was simple: to provide legal assistance for seniors facing financial exploitation or guardianship abuse. Emily helped organize the legal structure. David volunteered time through his firm. Within a few months, we had helped our first 3 clients. One elderly man whose nephew had tried to control his bank accounts, a widow whose caregiver had stolen thousands of dollars, and another woman who had been pressured by her children to sign away her property. Helping them felt strangely healing, because every time I listened to their stories, I understood their fear, their confusion, their sense of betrayal. But I also knew something else. They weren't powerless, just like I hadn't been powerless. One evening, about 6 months after moving to Monterey, I received a letter. The return address was from Seattle, Ryan Lewis. I sat at the kitchen table for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a single page. His handwriting looked uneven. **Mom***. I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me again. But I needed to say I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I was desperate and selfish, and I convinced myself it wasn't that bad. I see now how terrible it really was. You gave me everything growing up, and I repaid you in the worst way possible. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope someday you might believe that I regret it. Ryan**. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. I never wrote back. Not because I hated him, and not because I wanted revenge, but because some wounds need distance in order to heal. And sometimes the healthiest boundary is silence. That night, I stepped onto the balcony and looked out at the dark ocean. The waves rolled slowly under the moonlight. For the first time in a very long time, I felt something I hadn't felt during those difficult months. Peace. Not because the past had disappeared, but because I had survived it, and because I had chosen what my future would look like. A future built not on fear or betrayal, but on strength, and the quiet knowledge that my life still belonged to me. If this story moved you, there is one important lesson I hope you remember. Trust is one of the most powerful bonds in any family. But trust should never mean surrendering your voice, your independence, or your awareness. Elder abuse often hides behind smiles, polite words, and the appearance of care. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we never expected to question. But no matter how complicated the situation becomes, the truth still matters. Your voice still matters, and your life, no matter your age, still belongs to you. If you found Nicole's story meaningful, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in her situation? Have you ever witnessed a similar story in real life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And if you enjoy powerful, real-life inspired stories like this, please like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that remind us just how strong we really are.